orchestration. He knew how to write for the orchestra and how to obtain the effects that he was looking for. And the combination of colors, brass, woodwinds and string, there is nothing that is too much in his score. Every instrument is needed for the purpose he wants to obtain. It's a colorful, militaristic sometimes. There is a military march at the end. It has a very brilliant and fast ending. And it's very much under the influence of Italian opera, and especially Jacopo Meyerbeer, who was a very important composer running the Paris Opera. Paris was the center of the musical life in those years. After this overture, we have the Symphony of Robert Schumann. As you know, normally symphonies go in the second part of the piece, but considering that we have the Beethoven Violin Concerto, which is almost 50 minutes long, and we have Josh Bell, we decided to put it in the second part of the program. Therefore, we have this Symphony of Robert Schumann, the number 4, in the first part, a second piece. When music director Joan Falletta asked me to do this piece, I asked when was last time it was performed, and she said, not since I am basically here. So it means that probably I was the last one to do it when I was here. It's not an easy piece to do. It's not a piece that it's like any other of the symphonies of Schumann. It's a troubled piece. It's a music that contains problems, structural problems, orchestration problems, very difficult passages for the strings, and the relationship between fast and slow figures in the music sometimes is not well balanced, so it makes passages easy to be and clean. So we have worked very hard this week to bring, first of all, a clean interpretation of the work so you can understand how the work is written and built. Schumann finished this piece in 1851. And his health was already very bad. He's a man that suffered from severe depressions, and his life in a very terrible personal situation. He was sent to an asylum of insane people. And just 2 years after he finished this symphony in 1853 or 1854, he threw himself into the water of the river Rhine and was rescued. And after that, he was sent to this asylum. He represents the very soul of Romanticism. He is the composer of the German Romanticism. He embodied the ideas of the Romantic period. He wrote about it. He was a very fine writer about music, about compositions. He promoted the music of Brahms like nobody else. He promoted the music of Chopin in Germany when nobody knew them. He was a magnificent pianist. His music is known mainly his piano music, the piano concerto, Carnaval, Fantasia, and so on. And he wrote 4 symphonies. 3 of them are fairly well orchestrated. They don't present any problem. This one was like conceived during the years of troubles and the years of depression. So the first movement alternates moments of struggle and pain with moments of hope. Sometimes there is like a window opens and we see some sun, and then there is immediately another passage of struggle. The very rhythm of the first movement is already a rhythm that is anxious, like horses running. It's a rhythm that obliges us to have at the same time control of our speed when we are playing, but it's a difficult rhythm to control, and it alternates with moments of grace and beauty. And all that combined is not easy to govern, not easy to present a coherent interpretation, because in fact the symphony in itself is not coherent. What is the novelty here? He tried to do a piece that was linked to the entire 4 movements like a cycle. And he wrote music for all four movements that are very similar. And he took music from the first movement and put it in the second, and from the second to the fourth, to give us an idea of unity. So there is very little space between the four movements. They are rhythmical, they are full of life, but at the same time there are passages of beautiful tenderness, elegance, wonderful melodies. Alternates full orchestra with a very chamber idea of sound. And it ends retaking the material from the first movement, but in a very triumphant way. And the last passage is almost out of control, like someone who goes from states of sadness to extremely joy. So the end of the piece is, as I say, almost at the limit of the speed, like someone who can't contain its joy. It's very much a reflection that what Romanticism was. The artist was the center. The artist had a message to deliver to the society. He was not part of the society. He was a lonely person who would carry this gift to be able to express his soul without any restraint. So Schumann embodied this movement. And in the second part, we have a violin concerto, which is very difficult to describe in words. It was not my favorite concerto when I was young, and it has become by far my favorite violin concerto. I don't think there is anything so magnificent, so deep, so well crafted, that reveals the mastery of Beethoven like this work. This is not a tragic work, on the contrary, it is a work where Beethoven reached a sort of celestial balance between the content of music and the form. Probably what most strikes me is this sense of architecture, the architecture of the first movement, a very long first movement, where all the different sections are in perfect balance with each other, so we are able to just sit, relax, and listen, and let us be carried by the music. Everything is so transparent, so logical, more than anything, so logically well placed. Every section of every melodic passage corresponds to another of similar length, and that gives us a sense of harmony, a sense of harmony, which is extraordinary. The violin is not completely a solo instrument, as we are accustomed to hear in Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, for instance, which is a solo violin concerto with orchestra. Here is a tutti, orchestra and violin are one thing. Violin is somehow the voice of the entire orchestra that becomes solo. We play the same music, we use the same material. And this is the other great novelty of Beethoven. Mozart would have never written a piece that would have not started with a melody, a tune. Here there are really no melodies, there are motifs, which is a small melodic line that goes up and down that lasts 4 bars, and then there is another one that comes. What is the miracle is the way that he combines those elements in such a smooth and logic way that you have no doubt that the next note was the one that he placed. In fact, Leonard Bernstein used to say, Beethoven, like nobody else, knew what was going to be the next note to write. And that's, you need to be a real genius to choose the right note. Sometimes composers have to struggle trying to deal with form and material, musical content, how to place all the ideas in the form, and how to finally present a product that is highly convincing in the relationship between content and form. Here, this is a complete miracle. The relationship is absolutely perfect, the balance is absolutely perfect. It's like one of those buildings of Palladio, the famous Italian architect, where you see here nothing is missing. and there is nothing more, is exactly what it has to be. The form and the content are in perfect balance. This is the first movement of this concerto. The second one is a romanza, it's totally different. Is the same very short melody opened by the violins that is repeated over and over by different instruments, giving a sensation of nostalgia, of beauty, of something that we long, something that we miss. And the last is a popular folk song, peasant folk song, very close to what pastoral symphony is, where the whole orchestra and the soloist dance this magnificent music. As I said, it takes some time and it takes, I guess, years and maturity to learn to love this incomparable work, magnificent work, unique in the literature of violin and orchestra. It didn't have any success the first time it was played. It was ignored like for years, and then many years later, it was brought back by Mendelssohn, who naturally discovered the value of the piece, and a 12-year-old Joachim, famous violinist, presented it. And since then, it's the famous and glorious violin concerto you are going to hear. Thank you for attending. It's a real pleasure to be